And we are hot.
All righty. Let me get it shared around.
Yep, share around segment. We are live right now. Somewhere. Hang with us, folks. We're getting it shared around a little bit here. Here we go. Hey, Blake. Brian, hi.
Hey, everyone.
Hang with us here. We're in this, while we build, let people join. We're in the share around phase, the most boring segment of the evening, but just hang with us, man. It's been a really lumpy evening for me. I posted this to go live at 6 o'clock Eastern time, not 7. Work's been crazy. I've been with power, with power, back without power. I'm a generator again. Had to get the video updated so I didn't get in trouble from Lyle. Lyle, I want you to chime in and say, dude, that video looks good. Thanks for the update, man.
Are we is this like the makings of a country song? Is that what we're doing tonight?
I think so. Man, I do, man.
I hear you, man.
It's been lumpy. Okay, Kenny, you ready?
I'm ready.
Apparently I'm not. Let the music play. Here we are, man. We are talking about testing and judging tonight, Kenny.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting stuff.
Exciting stuff, man. Particularly if with the work that's been going on the last several Mondays and for Ethan, multiple days, but we having a lot of meetings lately, polishing up some testing things, making it just bigger, stronger, and faster. But today, Ethan Young is going to be joining us again. He's been instrumental as the chairman of the testing committee. He's going to join us again when he gets his dogs taken care of and participate in the conversation. But really tonight, along with everybody's questions, and comments, we're just going to kind of walk through the various levels of test and what they entail, kind of a peek behind the curtain and the philosophy behind them, and just the guiding principles and the philosophy that drives the approach to everything we do, to include judges' guiding principles and everything, and just in an effort to give us that guiding light, everything that we do, if it isn't, you can't point it back to those guiding principles and that core philosophy, then we got to reflect on what we're doing. So we're always making sure that is our compass and it drives what we do. So it really makes it easy, because if we come up with some ideas and it doesn't fit that, then it's not an idea.
That's
We're
right.
not one we pursue.
And I want to add something to it as well. The reason why we chose this to go after the training phase is because essentially, if you follow this framework of our testing outline, especially with the addition of one that we are just rolling out that we'll talk about when Ethan gets on, um, this really flows right into your training. And if you follow the progression of our testing program, you can essentially go from start to a pretty solid tracking dog. I'm not going to say finished, even though one of our tests is called that. I'm not going to say a finished dog because the dog is never truly finished, but
Yeah.
It just ties right into our training series.
Yeah, finish. We can call it a pretty well skilled dog. If you can achieve that finish level, which is, level 3 in the testing. Level 4 if you include the new one we're going to talk about. If you, early on, but yeah, I mean it's certainly a skilled dog if you can do that, and then the master of all skilled with the elite. The level 4, so to speak. That there's been just that one was a fun one to develop, buddy. I mean, and just the discussions and the back and forth and the what abouts and the what ifs. Well, hey, I've had this. Oh, well, yeah, so have I. Let's add that element. Just very, very realistic and very very challenging, as well as an elite level should be.
Right, and one thing that I kind of have pride in with our organization is keeping things realistic and as close to real life as we possibly can.
So let's talk about that a minute, Kenny, because that is that is one of the I'll say guiding principles that was used when developing the test. And
so, you want to read those guiding principles?
Yeah. In fact, I was just the guiding principles.
Now this is our judges' guiding principles, by the way. That.
Well, yeah, but now I got to have them ready. Hold on, man.
Oh man, I caught you.
You caught me. You caught me with my. Yeah, I told you it was a lumpy, but I'm
trying to go back too. Of course, we should have been prepared, but we kind of fly off the cuff around here, and that's just.
Yeah. Hold on, man.
No, you're good.
I got him here. You sent him in chat, didn't you?
I believe so, and I got him in my drive. I don't even know why I'm looking in the chat. It'd be so much easier to go to the drive.
Yeah, pull them up because I'm going to go back and read the just the philosophy of the organization first because it starts there, right. And then that helped drive the judges' guiding principles, and I do that's a great place to start, Kenny. So you tell me when you're ready, and you
go ahead. You want me to read this first, or you want to read yours?
Yeah, read yours.
Okay, so the core values for ABTA judges is. Judges play a vital role in our organization, ensuring that the process is fair, respectful, and reflective of the high standards of the organization. The core values outlined below serve as a guiding framework for judges to approach the responsibilities with professionalism, integrity, and expertise. These values aim to promote a positive and inclusive environment for both the dogs and their handlers, while fostering trust among participants, spectators, and the wider community. By adhering to these core values, judges can ensure a consistent, respectful, and ethical experience for all involved, further elevating the integrity and professionalism of the team. Number 1 is fairness, objective judging, impartiality. Number 2 is integrity, honesty, and confidentiality. Number 3 is knowledge and expertise, which is working characteristics, continuous learning. 4 is consistency, which standardized evaluation, clear communication. Number 5 is transparency, clear criteria, and feedback. Number 6, professionalism, respect for participants, time management. Number 7, objectivity. no external influences and focus on the task. 8 is inclusivity, openness to diversity and encouragement. Number 9, public image, social media, which is positive representation, responsible social media use, confidentiality online, respect for privacy. And we go into more detail with the judges in each category, but I was just kind of summarizing it there.
Yeah, that's right. Each one has its definition, and that's fine for this. And that's one of the things that we talked about last night as we were refining the process to become a judge. We've included that this must be part of it for if you're a new guy. Maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but hell, I'm known for that. But it's important enough that we make it part of the mentorship program to where the mentor must cover these with the new judge, their mentee, if you will. I hate that word, but that's what they are. And it is. But so coming off from that, let me just read again the philosophy of right off the website of the ABTA, and I'll do this as smooth as possible. The American Blood Trackers is a proud organization representing a community of dedicated individuals across the nation who share a common passion, using trained dogs to track and recover wounded game. Our members hail from diverse backgrounds and regions, united by shared commitment to ethical hunting practices, wildlife conservation, and the art of blood tracking. From coast to coast, our network of skilled trackers and their loyal canine companions work together to ensure no wounded animals left behind. We believe in promoting responsible hunting practices, supporting wildlife management efforts, and fostering a culture of camaraderie and knowledge sharing among members. Through the American Blood Trackers, we aim to provide platforms for trackers to connect, share knowledge, and learn from each other, promote the use of trained dogs and wounded game recovery, support conservation efforts and responsible hunting practices, educate the public about the importance of blood tracking and its role in wildlife management. So those two align. This is just in general. Then we took and developed it a little bit further, specific to the what we're expecting of the judges when they're engaging with the public, as outlined here. And it's it all boils back to ensuring we got the right people doing the right things for the right reasons.
Right. That's right.
So so you'd sent something, Kenny, and we read those guiding principles, and I started talking about realism. That's one of the things that I kind of noticed early on, even before I was invited to become a member of the team, is the focus on when tests are being developed. There was a very real and intentional focus on realism and how modeled after situations that you will reasonably and, depending on the circumstances, often encounter in the real world. And that has been a huge part of the focus as each one of these level tests have been developed. So right. And I don't know if we want to, how you want to kind of stroll through this, if we want to give them this.
I'll start with an overview of, I think a lot of people are familiar with our started season and finished, our first 3 levels, I felt like it was pretty solid. One thing we wanted to do, there's only so many ways you can lay a line, minister test, but what we wanted to add in is not just the realism, but ethical practices as well.
Yeah.
And we want someone that is going to represent our organization through a certification to know and I guess you'd say follow and obey those ethical practices, such as recognizing that there may be a property that you may not have permission to go across. You need to be able to identify that and know what proper steps to take. That's why we have a property line in there.
Yep.
Just different things like that. a hunter interview, a thorough hunter interview. And although that's not a pass or fail, but it's a coaching moment because, we pride ourselves on educating and helping coach and develop the trackers, so, as we hear them give their interview, we'll share feedback if it's needed. Actually, we're going to share feedback even if it's not needed. We're going to say, "Hey, great job,"
Yeah.
whatever. But again, everything that we're doing revolves around ethics and customer service and conservation.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say conservation is we are out there trying to recover every wounded game animal that we can, and that directly impacts conservation.
Absolutely does. Yeah.
And the ethical practices will ensure that we're able to continue doing this for many years to come. If we're just out there going rogue and just breaking all the laws, or we're out there and we just want to jump on a track too quick and we know it needs to wait because we want to make sure that we get it before someone else does, and we're costing people animals, well, guess what's going to happen? It's going to ruin the name of tracking. So
Yeah. Yep.
everyone was pretty familiar with those three, and then of course we went into the more advanced with the elite, which we'll share later. But as we were doing that, I sat back and I reflected on our whole program, which I'm not going to take all the credit, but I was very instrumental in the development process and kind of led the development process of all of these. But as we were going into the training series, and I started reflecting on the progression design system of our testing program, I realized there was something missing. And what was missing was what comes before that started level test.
Mm-hmm.
And over the years, I've tested plenty of dogs through multiple organizations, different testing platforms. And I have noticed where people will sign up for a test that has no experience at all. They're just there to try to learn something. And sometimes they get so discouraged that they don't want to continue on. So we kind of briefed on it a little bit last week, but I reached out to Ethan. I said, "Hey, man, I kind of have an idea here. We were missing something before that started level. How do you get to that started level?" And I kind of shared with Ethan what I was thinking. We bounced some ideas back and forth. And last night we had our testing committee meeting, and Ethan and I brought it up. So what we came up with, Matt, do you have the notes on that as to what the name of it?
Yeah. Stand by.
We basically came up with an introductory assessment, and Matt will get you the
Yeah,
actual
we're keeping it really simple, and they're just introductory level evaluations where we landed with that, Kenny.
right
After lots of
So here's what that is. So let's say you have a new dog, and let's say you've been working with it a little bit, or you haven't yet. You can sign up for this evaluation, and basically what we will do is we will lay a line that is 150 to 200 yards with 190-degree turn. The first 50 yards of that line will have blood. The rest of it will not. We will show you the start of it, and we will show you the direction that it goes in. And I'll just kind of explain why we chose to only put 50 yards of blood, why we chose it to be 150 to 200 yards.
Yeah, right.
And it'll only be a minimum of 30-minute lay time to a maximum of 60. So the purpose of this is for us to be able to watch you and your dog work that line. And it will progressively get a little tougher, even though it may seem easy to some of you guys that are experienced. But this is for the people that are maybe getting into it or have a new dog and they just want to see where they're at. And what we're doing is we're going to help establish your baseline. So we're going to watch you. And the reason there's blood on the first 50 yards is it will show us if that person is joysticking or steering the dog. If the dog is trying to work it, let's say there's some scent drift or something. The dog's working just off the line, but they're following the line paralleled. But the person sees the blood and keeps pulling their dog back. Well, that's some feedback, some coaching that we need to go through. Well, then the blood stops, and we want to see what happens at that point. What does the handler do? The dog, essentially should follow that scent line, and then it's going to get to the 90-degree turn. Now, again, this isn't a test; this is an evaluation. So what we're going to do is we're going to work with you and your dog on that line and establish a baseline of where you're at. When we are through with that, we are going to show you how to lay a line, and we're going to have you lay the line based on that baseline, and then we're going to help develop a plan for you to get from where you're at now to that started level test.
Yep.
And I'll kind of read. It says, at the conclusion of this evaluation line, the judge will provide feedback to the handler, provide an overview of the ABTA testing program and started level test, then work with the handler to lay an additional training line and provide pointers for progressing their dog. Is how it's written in the document. So, like I said, our focus was kind of that more advanced, and I just sat back when we're going through that training series. I'm like, we're missing something here.
Yeah. So how young of a pup could someone, would it be appropriate for someone to bring on, sign up for an evaluation?
My recommendation would be, I honestly would say no less than the 4-month mark.
Yeah.
There may be some people that want to do less, but I just don't. My personal recommendation, I would wait until at least that 4 to 6 month mark.
Yeah, I think so too, and just based on what I've learned through my dog and throughout the course of my career and engagement in the in tracking, and just too young of a pup, that's just too much scent. They don't really, they don't know how to process it. They start getting older like that. That's a simple line, but there's a lot of scent on it because it's fresh and it's clean. But I think you wouldn't gain much, if anything, by going too early.
No, now you do have your exceptions. I mean, I
of course
passed dogs at 3. I passed level 1 tests with dogs that were 3 months old, but that's not the norm. So
oh, there's Ethan. We got Pop Ethan in here. Good Lord, slacker dog. We're get too caught up in correcting us in the comments, Ethan, that you didn't have time to jump on.
Y'all were looking for the name. I had it on the top of my head, so I just tossed it on.
I'm just
Hate away.
Yeah, but Kenny, you're right. And another way to look at it is you don't have anything to lose by not going earlier than 4 months. You're not losing anything.
No,
so to get a good quality assessment, give your dog a certain level of, I hesitate to use the word maturity with a 4-month-old puppy, but as opposed to a 12-week-old puppy, I guess it's relative. And
the way I like to term that is maturity and focus.
Yeah, there you go.
They're not going to be mature as far as fully developed or anything like that. It's just mature enough to remain focused at the task that you're asking them to do.
Yeah, hence why the line is only 100 yards long with one turn. We want it to be have a turn, have a check, just to see what it does there. We want it to lose the blood before the 90. just to see if it can continue the line after the blood. And it's not a pass or fail. It's not a test. It's just an assessment. Nothing's wrong if your dog doesn't go past that 50 yards of blood. Nothing's wrong if your dog can't acquire the 90. That's the whole idea of this, is to, particularly depending on the age of the dog. There's no wrong in any of it. It's all about learning and coaching through that stuff and giving the handler the tools to continue to work through that.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with it. Doesn't even engage with the line. I mean,
that's right.
Maybe someone just doesn't have a clue where to start, but we're able to coach them through that. So, that's why it's not a test, it's an evaluation. And, the other thing, like, we want that, the reason it's 150, 200 yards and, we have the 50 yards of blood, and the blood isn't for the dog, it's for the handler to,
Yeah.
And the reason we want it to stop prior to that 90 is we don't want the handler to steer the dog through that 90. We want to see what's going on there, the total package of dog and handler.
But if the handler does, because it is human nature to instinctively do that, we don't even realize it at times, it's a coaching moment.
Correct.
It's just a coaching moment. Ethan, do you have any? I mean, you and Kenny are the ones that really developed this. I'm just, again, be playing the role of the pretty face like normal. It's just kind of what I bring to the organization. You have any comments on the introductory level evaluation?
No, that pretty well sums it up. I mean, it's an opportunity to see where you are, if anywhere, and get some pointers on where to go from there, and what testing a dog is and what the benefits are of that, and how the ABTA serves that role. So it's a pretty unique offering, I think, but a really compelling one for people getting into the activity.
Yeah.
Yeah. We want to set people up for success.
Yep. Absolutely.
And we have a couple of comments here I want to touch on. Like, Shannon Blocker said, trust your dog. Well, trusting your dog is good, but your dog has to be trained to be able to trust it. So that's what we're talking about there. I mean,
yep.
And yes, trust your dog, but always verify it, because just like us, dogs have bad days. Dog makes mistakes, So I do agree with trust your dog, but there are times where maybe you shouldn't.
No, but that's by knowing your dog, and you only do that by doing things like getting evaluation and getting time behind your dog. I mean,
correct.
Yep.
And Gene Ferris said, would starting a pup depend on how well disciplined it is or how much it has matured? Absolutely.
Yep. Cool. So then the natural progression is, if they want to continue with the testing series, which, like you said, as you opened up, if we call the introductory level the absolute foundational piece, and not by no means a requirement, but absolutely a great opportunity for somebody who is very new to it and maybe has never had a tracking dog before. It gives them a very, very good foundation.
Correct.
So then
I don't want to say that this is only for someone new into tracking. Maybe you do have experience tracking. Maybe you have a new dog. You just want to see, hey, where does someone else think I'm at?
Yeah, right. Yeah, great point. And then, like we said, if you follow the sequence, the started, the season, the finish, the elite, all of that is set up to be progressive, and one is foundational to the other, and as you continue to prepare for each level, it's all because it is so scenario based, as I call it, real world scenario based. You are training and developing a tracking dog
and handler.
And handler. Yeah, that's a great point. Great point. Yeah. Ethan? Any?
Yeah, the and handler is important. That's where, I don't know, myself as a trainer, that's where probably the biggest point in the process, where I guess the most important point in the process is that handoff from dogs I train to preparing the handler to have a dog that's trained, and then continue to either maintain or progress it. So you can absolutely have a great dog in the hands of the wrong handler and performs poorly, and vice versa. You know, some dogs are super independent and resilient to mistakes and what have you. But yeah, I mean, dogs are prone to influence, and obviously on the actual field experience side or field tactics side, if you're not, you know, learning the anatomy and the tactics and wait times, you could be having a great dog that is just not set up for success, and the animal's not, you know, it's not going to be a scenario where you recover anything because you haven't developed yourself.
Well, a great dog can make a bad handler look good. And
That's
a
right.
bad handler can make a great dog look bad. You know, it goes hand in hand. You know,
I agree.
speaking of Shannon Blocker, we said trust your dog. You know, I was able to judge Shannon's dog for one, and Shannon's got some great dogs. Shannon's a good handler. But if I take that dog, although it's good and it's independent, and I put it in the hands of someone that's green that doesn't know, they may overhandle it and the dog look pretty bad.
Yep.
Although especially his lab, I don't think anyone could steer that dog in the wrong direction unless they had it on a lead and, you know, pulling it around. But, you know, again, and I think a lot of the people that's chiming in the comments, they're pretty seasoned handlers, and that's why I wanted to touch on that. Trust your dog. You know, a seasoned handler that knows their dogs, sure, you know, trust your dog. But when you have someone that is new, a new handler with a new dog, both of them are going to make mistakes, and especially a young dog is going to make mistakes.
Of course. Yeah, it's just part of the development. It's inevitable. You can't, and you should expect them to make mistakes and be prepared for it. That's, you know, I just got back from the Missouri event, and that's one of the things that was talked about there for new handlers. There's in the real world, you're going to be the highest of the highs at times, thinking that your dog's going to find Bigfoot, and then you're going to be the lowest of lows, and you're going to be ready to give it up. And as a new handler, you know, neither of those two things are true. Right. You know, and just particularly the lows of the lows. You know, it's just part of the learning curve. It's part of the experience building, and that's how experience is built, by getting in the field, getting behind your dog, making those mistakes that are inevitable. You know, the best we can hope for is they're kept to a minimum, and when we do make them, we learn from them, and learn how to, you know, and can learn from them. And then not only learn from them, my favorite line is, yeah, you can learn all you want, but if you don't apply what you learned, there is zero value in what you learned. You got to apply it.
Right. Absolutely.
Is that Otto, Kenny?
It is. No, this is Moose.
Oh, hi, Moose.
I have a Moose.
Moose's debut. Yeah.
Yeah, Moose is.
Well,
you'll see why he got his name.
Yeah, he looks like
for wire-haired Dachshund.
Is that the one who was baying up that cow the other day? You sent me or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's funny. That's too funny. Let's grab a question here. Perry Lawrence says on the finish test they have to be done at a seminar, right?
Currently,
yes. Perry, that's been discussed. Currently, that is the status.
So one thing I want to say is our testing committee is very, very active. It's actually every day there's some form of communication and working on something daily.
Yeah. And Chairman Young is really truly doing a yeoman's work in championing all of that documentation and in leading that band of
Heathens.
married men. So
Yeah. So we started off with the introductory. So, now let's flow into the started and let's discuss the attributes and the reasons for them. So started level test, begins with a hunter interview. And we actually states thorough hunter interview. And it's not just about, the questions of what you would ask at the shot site. It begins before then. We want to know, what kind of details are you looking for? Now I'm just going to tell you, the more experienced I get, the less I care about some of the information. And we cover that in seminars. And actually, Matt and we were talking about the Michigan event coming up. And, I kind of told him my stance on it. And that's some stuff we're going to cover. And we're going to cover it in PA. And I'm probably in Alabama. I'm sure some of it will be brought up. But so it starts there. We want to hear, where are you at with your interview process, the questions you ask. Then it goes into the lines, pretty basic line, 400 to 500 yards, 2 to 6 hours old, a wound bed. Now, you're not required to identify the wound bed, but, we like to see that you're paying attention and call it out. And, the property sign, we kind of discussed, why is there a property line there? It's for ethical practices so that you're cognizant of your surroundings. You pay attention, you ask the questions, hey, do you have permission to cross this property line? So, again, that's an ethics thing, and that's pretty basic test. You have anything to add, Matt or Ethan?
I was just gonna see, is it possible for one of y'all to pull it up on the screen? Is that something y'all can do? Maybe.
Yeah. Which one do you want pulled up, Ethan?
I mean, y'all are discussing the started one. I figure it might be helpful to have them pulled up. May not.
Michael Pritz, we will get to that question a little later as we get deeper into some of these tests. We're kind of going over the testing process and the reason for the attributes, and that will come up.
Yeah, bear with me, Ethan. I don't have electronic copies.
Well, we can talk through it. I mean, I got them pulled up here. I pretty much know them like the back of my hand, and people can always go on the website and pull it up and research it if need be. But as far as what I just covered, do you guys have anything to add there?
No, not really. Maybe just the Blue Crew. The hunter interview. I think it's good because it's like you said, it gives you an opportunity. If nothing more, it can give the testee time to let them nerves dissipate a little bit, but it also gets them thinking about it a little bit. And and then one of the unique elements to it is that recognition of a property stop and just requiring them to acknowledge it, at that level.
Right.
And that's foundational. And I want to say acknowledge it because that's all that's required at this level. What's worth mentioning, Kenny, is we talk about this. Each one of these tests, you have the option to do it on lead or off lead.
Correct.
And some may not know that. So if you want to test on lead, great. You check the on lead box. You want to test off lead on the same test, you can. If you're
provided we have permission from the landowner of the testing site.
Yes, of course. Yes. But if you test off lead, that does bring one smaller element in early on in the test to ensure that you have control of your dog. But
Demonstrating recall.
Demonstrating recall. Yeah. So I say it's not, the only thing you have to do is acknowledge it. Well, if you're going to be off lead, and appropriately so, because off lead does increase the level of risk and responsibility for the handler. So if you're going to do it on any of these tests, excuse me, it's going to increase that level of responsibility within the within that test, but nothing bad or overcomable by any stretch.
And if you don't mind, I want to hit a couple of these.
Yeah. Let's do it.
So Matt Lord, he says, I know hunter interview is important, but I've been told 90% of what they say isn't true due to buck fever or whatever. What details should we prioritize? So I think I wouldn't say 90%, but and I don't think that they mean to give false information, but the things you want to ask are, where do they think they hit the deer? And oftentimes they're going to say, oh, I put a perfect shot on blah, blah, blah. Well, how did the deer react? What kind of sign did you find? What color was the blood? Do you have a picture of the blood? How long did you wait? So I'm not looking at the total picture to see, necessarily whether they're right or wrong. But if you ask enough questions, you're going to paint that picture, or they're going to paint that picture for you. And you kind of put all the pieces of the puzzle together. Now, Darren Miner, when I tested him, or it's actually Joe Tenney and I tested him, I like how Darren Miner did his interview, and I like sharing it because he asked questions, and then he would move on to another question, and then he would go back to the first question and ask it in a different manner to see if you gave the same answer. And that's probably because career training.
His career in the background. Yeah.
So, but there's tricks like that. But again, I don't put a lot of faith into where they say they hit the deer. Right. I honestly don't put a lot into reaction. Now, I like to ask the questions, and then of course when they say, "Oh, I hit it," it was a heart shot because it mule kicked. Well, I like to ask those questions because then I can explain to them, "Hey, a mule kick does not always mean a heart shot. In fact, it could be a clean miss." So we're able to give that feedback so that their expectations aren't unrealistic. A good one is, the deer dropped and it laid there for a few minutes, then got up and left. Oftentimes handlers are trained, oh, that's a back whack. You don't go on, it's low odds of recovery. All that means is that spinal cord was shocked and there was some temporary paralysis. That could be above or below the spine. That's why I go on them. Now, I will say the majority of the time it is above the spine. It's not a recovered deer, but it can be recovered. So,
yep. Yeah, when it comes to the hunter interview, Kenny, I totally stole this from one of my mentors, but I shared it with you during the interview. Much like you, although you have far more experience than me, my approach to the interview has evolved in my short career. In that, I used to ask all of those detailed questions and really try to process and think, and ended up outsmarting myself. So now, I ask those things because I want to know, okay, what color was the blood, to get a feel for the flavor, but just to see. But ultimately, there are, what I stole from my mentor, two things you're trying to determine: is the deer dead or going to die, and what time you should pursue it, save for property permissions and stuff like that. But if we're talking about specifically, the shot, that's really, really what you're trying to find out. All of these questions about the blood and the angle and all that, because you're trying to determine what organs may have been hit. Where they think they hit the deer. and that's what all in an effort to find out, is the deer dead or going to die, and what time should you go after it?
Well, here's something else that a lot of people doesn't think about. And the reason I like to ask a lot of questions on the phone is I'm buying time.
Yeah,
Something people doesn't think about. Time is always on your side, so the longer you keep them on the phone and you keep asking, and that's why I kept hearing typing.
Yeah.
The longer you keep them on the phone, you're buying time of them rushing you.
Yep.
So, I'll ask questions, and then I'll kind of share some stories, and kind of set some expectations, some realistic expectations before we even go. So I'm seeing some comments flying, like Shannon Blocker says, I quit asking any questions. I told the hunter to get me 50 yards and stop. I let dogs work it out. And I'm kind of that point. But again, if a hunter calls me and I tell they're super impatient, I'm going to ask a bunch of questions just to slow that down. And then I'm going to start talking through stories and just making small talk just to buy that time. So maybe a little trick to keep in your bag for when you need it.
Yeah, I agree. Let's grab a couple more, Kenny, because they're starting to fly in here.
Okay.
Blake Schnarr says, well, at training event, after a test is complete, you then have to send off a screenshot of Onyx for your test for approval. How often does a test line get rejected and the test taker has to redo?
I don't think we've ever had a post-test rejected as far as the line. So the line has to be approved before the testee ever shows up and puts their dog on it. Now, we have rejected some there. In fact, one of our board members was testing, and the judge laid the line, and the 90 was a wide sweep, and we rejected that line, and they weren't able to test that day.
So let's set that up for those, maybe folks don't know that. So the process at a real high level, an ABTA test line is laid by the judge in accordance with the standards for the level they are testing for, with all of the attributes flagged and marked, and those crispy 90s, as Ethan calls them. And then that is it's to be documented on two devices. Your Garmin is a primary, then another secondary mapping system. We prefer Onyx. Dog Tracks for the documentation it offers, but Onyx is fine. It is acceptable. That then, before the test is even run, has to be sent to the judging committee, testing committee, and that line has to be approved to ensure that it does meet the attributes as outlined for that level test. Once someone from the testing committee responds with a thumbs up, you now have a runnable line. You run your test, you administer your test per the testing protocol, and then you submit the results of the test, the overlay of the dog, again, the Garmin and the secondary mapping system. Garmin is preferred. And then you submit that to the testing committee. And with your feedback as the judge and your recommendation, the testing committee will review that line that you laid. It reviews the path the dog took over that line. It considers your feedback as the judge. Did they hit the wound bed? Did they, whatever the criteria are, and then a pass or fail determination is made at that time. So, Blake, I think what you're talking about, like Kenny said, yeah, there are some lines that are rejected before they're run. But if you're talking about how many test are a no pass. I don't know. Probably that percentage is as high as or as low as any.
Well, I will say this: we haven't had many test lines rejected. I mean, and we'll get into that later on the training process of the judge. Has it happened? Yes, but normally it's early on. In fact, I only know of maybe a handful. Now there has been some. I'm not going to hide anything. There's been some coaching where, hey, this will be okay, but we need to tighten it up a little on the next time. And oftentimes when we question it, it's a matter of we just need them to zoom in because it may look like a sweep when it's zoomed out, but then when you zoom in, there is actually a 20, a sharp, crisp 90. But then they had to maneuver around something 20 yards later. So when you're zoomed out, it doesn't look crispy. But as far as the actual test, I'll say this: the vast majority of the time, someone or the people know they failed before it even gets to that point.
Sure. And I'm pretty sure in the judge's procedures, it's like the judge must notify the testee if the failure criteria has been met, like as soon as it's been met, correct?
Yeah.
Yes. Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And to go back to like test lines being rejected, all the rejection happens during the training process, because that's when people are sending we're sending spaghetti, screenshots of everything. So by the time somebody's got that seal of approval as a certified judge, they've sent in a pile of good looking lines already. They've demonstrated that they can lay them to standard.
That's exactly right, Ethan. So and we'll get, like Kenny said, we'll get into that as we get into the judge's process and stuff, and what they have to do, what I'm going through right now, and of getting all of this wonderful feedback and mentorship from folks like you guys.
Now, I do want to add, we have had judges submit lines, and their recommendation may have been a pass, but they were on the fence, or it may have been a fail and they were on the fence, and then the committee reviews it and makes the final determination, and it does happen. We've had people pass that, it may not have been the prettiest, but were all the boxes checked. And that's what we come back with. Hey, did they check all the boxes? Well, yes. Okay, then it's a pass.
Yeah.
So we're doing everything we can to remove the politics from it. And
and making it objective, not subjective, right? Yeah, cool. All right. I mean, comments are flowing in. You want to nail some, or you want to?
Yeah, we can keep nailing
them. Ethan, do I have to put yours up there? You're answering questions.
No, I mean, I think someone just asked a cool one that I was tempted to, message, but I think it'd be cool for someone to address over the live. That's just Mother Cell's question. What makes people think they have to test? If you can see that one.
Who wrote? Whose question is it?
Just Mother Cell.
Yeah. So what makes people think they have to test? To me, it's a personal preference thing. I have seen solid dogs fail a test, and some dogs that passed the test and struggled bad when on an actual track, because there's some states that require you to be certified. Great conversation piece, Jess. Kenny?
Yes, there are some states that do require a certification. There are some state networks or groups that require certification for you to be listed on their state list.
That's right.
Now, I do want to address the first part, that what makes people think they have to take a test. I don't think anyone thinks they have to take it unless they're required to take it. There's people that want to take it. And, I used to be one of the people that next line, it says, to me, it's a personal preference thing. I've seen solid dogs fail a test and some dogs that passed the test that struggled bad on an actual track. That used to be my philosophy, but once I actually got in there and I started doing it, I realized, hey, this is fun. not only is it fun, it's keeping me active with training my dog, working my dog, and maintaining that working relationship with my dog. And as you start preparing for these tests and you go through these tests, you do develop more skill and more bond. And, there's no downside to it. If you can think of a downside, please tell me. And I really struggle with that part of people saying, "Oh, I don't need a ribbon to put deer on tailgates." No, you don't. And it doesn't mean that because someone's passed a certification, their dog is better than anyone else's. And yes,
That's right.
you may have found deer behind someone's dog that had a certification. Guess what? There's been deer found behind you. And if there hasn't, you just haven't been tracking long enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Ethan?
think to me the most compelling thing is like, you see the dogs, they bring up the dogs that don't do well on test tracks. And to me, that's my experience is most of the time the dogs that have a good amount of legit seasoning in the field, like they've been on real tracks, real recovers and what have you. And then there's a period after that where they may find this way less fun relative to that new thing that they've been doing, which is piling up real deer. And I think there's this idea out there, if I try and get my dog to run these training tracks, I'll burn them out, make them bored. And, there's no real purpose anyways, because we're finding deer. And I totally think it's possible to burn your dog out and, maybe stress them out, trying to get them to train and what have you. But I think that's just bad training. And I so far haven't found a dog that can't nudge past that. And I don't really feel like it because it's not a leg shot that I'm going to be able to go, run down in the moonlight. But to me, the coolest part is like it's a benchmark to just check your training against, as well as check your ability to train. Like if your dog will engage in training lines, the sky's the limit on what you can do and what skills you can what challenges you can expose them to and skills that you can develop. And those skills, even though they might run it with less drive than they run like a fresh swinging leg, but that skill transference is absolutely one-to-one. If you show them something super complex and they have to search through it or search for it, whatever that is, I mean, that shows up as in the field as another tool in their toolbox. And I think that to me is the most compelling part of testing, is just getting test ready means getting your dog to where it'll engage with a training line. And then you have the ability to train.
And not just
if any of that made sense.
Yeah, and not just that. I want to add in the part of when we train our dogs, most people are laying their own lines and working their dogs on the lines that they lay. Now, there may be some people out there that team up with someone and they get to run some blind tracks. But at the end of the day, the majority of it is you laying the line, you following your dog, you critiquing your dog. Who's critiquing you? What set of eyes do you have following you? So you may be making mistakes that you don't even know. So, and I'm just I'm gonna throw John Vaughn under the bus here a little bit, and I know he wouldn't mind. John trains dogs with us every day, literally every day. 10, 12 lines a day plus. And if I'm not out there working with him and he's videoing them, I am reviewing the videos to see the progress of the dog, as well as how, what's going on with the training line. John has trained over 200 dogs with us. And he will still steer a dog at times.
Unwittingly, probably just
he's not even realizing he's doing it.
Right.
So if someone that does this as their profession, and there's not many people out there that lays and runs 10, 12 plus mock trails a day, every day. And if someone that has been doing that full time, John's probably been with us full time for a few years now. And if someone at his level is making those mistakes, inadvertently, you likely are at times only doing 1, 2, or 3 a week.
Yeah. I guess my comment to that question, and again, it was a great comment / question
Oh, yeah.
because it inspires good conversation. And like I said, I just came back from the Missouri event. There was a lot of testing that went on there. There were a lot of successful people. Congratulations to those who were successful. And there were people who did not pass the test. You notice I did not say failed. They did not pass the test. Congratulations to the people who did not pass the test because you got great feedback. I talked to a few of them. One of the people I talked to was a really interesting conversation. And it wasn't long, but it was neat because, this person is a dog trainer, different genre, um, but got his pointy-eared dog in, started tracking, pretty new tracker, and started training. He said he was so nervous on that level 1 test. He said his dog sensed that. He said he could just tell his dog kept looking back at him and just knew that Dad was upset and stressed about something, and hence, he believes, and so it makes sense to me that it impacted that dog's ability to focus on, the line, and the dog did not pass the test. But that dog is going to put just as many deer on the tailgate. The dog doesn't know it failed the test. The dog doesn't care that it passed or failed the test. So it doesn't matter. But there's a lot of comments, and I want to, because we're in the moment, Kenny, I want to hit a lot of these comments and feedback on this very topic.
Yeah, I don't even care if we get through all this stuff. I mean, it's what they want.
Yeah, because there's some really good stuff here. But yeah, I mean, the testing, man, and I'll tell my story very briefly again. I needed my level 1 certification in the state of Michigan at the time. It's no longer required. And I needed a level 1 certification to be in my tracking network. I think most of the requirements are going to be at the local network level, more because I think there are very few states that require a certification. Michigan doesn't anymore. But once I had what I had, I was done, because it didn't get me anything. That's what I thought. I've told the story a million times here and on my own podcast. And then I realized just how short-sighted that perspective was. I was I was holding myself back. I wasn't getting because I wasn't allowing myself to get feedback from a more experienced person, simply because I was afraid of failing the test. I didn't want to fail, so my ego defense mechanism went up, and I started making the excuse that it's because I don't need. It doesn't get me anything. That was very short-sighted. After I broke that, knocked down that barrier, I quickly took my 2 very successfully, and I worked hard to prepare for it. I got some great feedback, and the feedback was validation feedback, and that was wonderful and a great confidence builder for me. And now, I'm going for. I have 2 more tests lined up, and then a third one. I'm going to test for my level 3. Because I promised somebody I would, and by God, I'm going to do it because I promised them I would. And now, if I don't pass these tests, will I be bummed? Yes, of course I will, because I'm working hard for them. But the value does not lie in the pass or fail. The value lies in the preparation and the feedback you get from experienced people. That's the value.
Right.
Are you? So let's just Nicole Sherwood talking on this topic. Here in New Jersey, we have to either hold an ABTA starter certification or a UBT1 certification before we can even get our required fish and wildlife permit to track. So there it is. Michigan used to require that. They don't anymore.
And I actually flew to New Jersey and administered her test because she was having trouble finding an avenue to get that certification so she could track.
Yep. And
one thing I want to ask you, Matt,
yeah,
if you weren't testing, if you wouldn't have wanted to go for your UBT1 or your UBT2 and now are testing, do you think you would have been out there working your dog as much?
No, not. I would have continued to work because I enjoy it and I did want to develop and get better. But when you put the word as much, absolutely not. Because I teamed up with my great friends, Brent and Jeanette Ladd, right here 20 miles from me. And we got together for like 3 weeks straight, maybe more, for about a month. We'd get together and we were trading lines. And I wouldn't have done it that frequently. And we, all three of us took our UBT2s at that same event. And all three of us has zero problem passing them, not because we are extraordinary by any sense. We were simply prepared. And because I was trying to preparing, I was getting in the field and doing the work, and doggone it, I learned something in the preparation. I learned something at the test. I've got to get going and prepare for the one I've got coming up at the end of May. I've done a little bit of preparation for the one I've got coming up this Saturday. This Saturday is an ABTA starter level, and I've done some of that here as I've been, using that as practice for my my judges process. So, yeah, the answer is no. I wouldn't have been out as much.
Right. And Perry Lawrence says right here, totally right on that, Kenny. I have gotten good advice on tests on my fails and passes.
Yep.
Now, yeah, Emily, personally, it's great to have the goals of passing the test to keep us rolling in the off season. Something else I want to touch off, which is not related to her comment, is I see this trend of people getting a certification, putting it on their truck, putting it on their cards, thinking that it's going to give them some credibility to the hunter. But at the end of the day, the hunter doesn't know what our organization is on average. They don't know what UBT is. They don't know what the tests are. They don't know what the certification means. What they care about, can you find my deer?
Yeah.
So to do it for marketing purposes as far as to hunters, I don't think there's much benefit there.
Yeah.
If any.
What I will say, and Ethan, I'm going to give you a minute because I've been monopolizing it here, but I do think the test does. I do believe that it's a credential.
It does. The average hunter doesn't care.
The dogs don't care, but it does verify that your dog understands its job, and its job is to follow a line that starts here and ends there. So it is a validation. You're right. I mean, I have UBT certified on my business cards. Just people don't know what that means, but that they can look at it and go, oh, okay, so he's certified in something. So I do think there's an element of credibility, but for heaven's sakes, it does not mean the person that doesn't have that on their card are any better or any worse by any stretch. Right. But I will not. I will not diminish that there is credibility in a certification. It's not just it's not a useless piece of paper because it validates the work that you've done.
No, I agree there. I'm just saying as far as to the hunter. I mean, I've handled and tested and passed, I don't know, 40, 50 dogs on tests.
Yeah.
I don't advertise that anywhere.
No,
and for me, I mean, I'll just tell the story about my first test. I failed miserably. I took a dog to test on a level 2 test that had 600 recoveries, 600 tailgated deer. And we didn't make it 100 yards and failed miserably. Can the dog put deer on tailgates? Yeah, it put a bunch of deer on tailgates. It still does today. And Can I handle a dog in the woods and recover a deer? Sure. But I sucked that day. I mean, it just, my nerves got to me. And it showed me some things that I need to work on. And actually it really wasn't early on in my tracking career per se, but it was a point where a lot of us get pretty comfortable. We think we're almost invincible at times. We're on a good stride. I had a 69% recovery rate that year. I mean, we were crushing it. We were recovering deer that we probably shouldn't have recovered. I mean, just crazy stuff. And I was on cloud 9 and I got humbled real quick. And if you notice my verbiage, I failed the test within 100 yards.
Yeah. Yep. Ethan, you have any more you want to say on that? Boy, the comments are flying in here, man.
Gosh, I did have one, and now I've since lost it. Oh, well, one thing I was going to point out on my business card, it says certified dog butler, which brings up another point that I don't have any personal dogs that are certified. I've only tested client dogs, so I don't know. Take what you want with that. I've never had anybody ask about certification or anything in the field. And to y'all's point, I would imagine if they could see, okay, Jim Bob, I could call, if they don't know anything else and they look up and there's Jim Bob and I'm bad at making it, and Ethan, and one's certified and one's not, that might nudge them in one way or the other. But other than that, I don't think it's even a thought that crosses their mind. Or
poll some hunters, and I think you'll be shocked. They don't care. They care how many deer have you put on the tailgate.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. No, I've never had anybody ask me if I'm certified. I haven't. I'm only what I refer to myself as a moderately experienced tracker. No one has ever asked about my certifications, but they do ask occasionally how many deer I've recovered. But they've never asked, and I've never heard of anybody shopping a tracker based on certification. They'll shop them based on price and how quick you can get there. Both are also wrong reasons to shop,
right?
But I've never heard them shop for certifications.
No, I have. I mean, I do know of incidents where people have asked, because we are, the organizations and the testing and certification is gaining some popularity even outside of the tracking community. It is. But at the end of the day, what most hunters care about is who can get there the quickest is the number one. And number two is how many deer have you recovered?
Mm-hmm.
Again, not correct, but that's just the hunter.
You got a comment you want to pull it up, Kenny? I'm scrolling.
Just looking at Chuck Darby here says the thing is all the testing is to show you where you need work or what your dog needs work on. And I mean he's right. And too many times we become complacent and going out there and having someone else follow behind you. They're going to see stuff that you don't.
Yep. And here's Perry validating that. Totally right, Kenny. I've gotten good advice on tests on my fails and passes. And let me just Jeff Mothercell appreciated the feedback on his comments and questions. So thank you.
Let's touch on the one right below that, Shannon Blocker. What's the negative to a seasoned dog having a pup to teach and through a season? I am a firm believer that you must train every dog independently. If not, you are likely going to end up with a Me Too dog that's just going to tag along and want to get a participation prize because they followed the other dog to the prize at the end.
Shannon, I don't know if you noticed, Ethan about broke his neck, shaking his head yes, and an affirmation to Kenny's statement. So
I tried it with the dog I worked really hard on in the summer to see. We ran, I don't know, we recovered 10 or 12 deer with him right out of the gate. A dog I trained during the had some theories because we used to run beagles and we would keep our really good dogs separate because a lot of times, you'd see if there was a lead dog that would outwork the others, they would just kind of develop this complacency and say like, I'll just wait till the fun starts. And I know of some people that have pack trained dogs and had some really good dogs realize we're
And there goes the connection again.
there goes Ethan. I think we've talked to him about his Starlink. More stars and a better link.
So one thing I want to point out is I'm in the area I live in. Our community is very well known for hunting deer with dogs.
Yeah.
And
okay.
Typically people that hunt deer with dogs, they'll put the dogs as a pup into a rabbit pen, some of them. But a lot of them will just, turn young dogs out with older dogs. And then they talk about, oh, I got pack dog, or the end of the season, I'm getting rid of this dog, it's a pack dog. And they talk about their trail dogs and their jump dogs. And basically their trail dogs are dogs that
still there, man.
Have a lot more natural ability.
All right, I got you. Yeah, I seemed it got chopped.
Yeah, he's still having issues there.
Looked like it got real choppy there, but
yeah, you're still having issues apparently.
Okay, that's fine.
You're okay now, Ethan. You've stabilized. We just Kenny picked up the conversation, so we'll let Kenny finish his thought. But you're good now, Ethan.
Yeah, so I see it a lot in my community because there's just so many deer dog hunters, and they will literally just turn, a lot of them will just turn dogs out, young pups out with the older pack. And you'll see one or two out of 20 dogs that make what they call a solid trail dog or a cold nose dog. It's not actual training. Some of them do, don't get me wrong, but the majority, they get a dog that has the natural abilities, that picks it up quicker. And, those are the ones that they're calling their trail and jump dogs. It's not training. They're just packing them in. And most of the dogs that they dump out of that box to chase that deer are just tagging along, barking because the seasoned dog is barking.
Yeah, because everybody else is. It must be the thing to do. Don't know why they're doing it. Yeah. I want to put this one up here because Rodney, you're asking, what are you dragging? And I want to put that up there because is that a question, clarifying the comments, is that a question of how we're laying a practice line or how we're laying a test line when you say dragging? Because we want to clarify that if that's what you mean. We're not dragging anything, and I think that's important. So let's drop another comment. Tony Hayes, I no doubt failed my first UBT2 last spring simply because of nerves. I don't think I've ever been so nervous. Yeah,
So someone messaged me, Michael Beck messaged me, and he said, feel free to share my story if you'd like.
Yeah.
So we went to Pennsylvania, Michael Beck, and I had been kind of following some of Michael Beck's training on social media, on Facebook, as I do many of you guys, and you probably don't even realize it. I sit back and I look at this stuff, and I'm looking at Michael Beck's training, and and one day I actually reached out to him and gave some critiques and feedback, and he was receptive. Anyways, we get there to test, and he goes out, take his started level test, and he comes back literally, and this is no lie, literally in tears. And he was so frustrated. He was about to leave. He said, just keep my money for the seminar, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what's going on? So I go and talk to the judge. I said, hey, what happened? He said, man, he just got nervous. and he failed, and there was a little more feedback in there. And so, and I've done this at other events too. This isn't just with Michael. I went to another judge, Jason Byer. I briefed Jason on what happened. I said, "Hey, Jason, go grab a pair of tracking shoes for me," while I talk to him. And I'm talking to Michael and Ralph and I, and we're like, "Look, you failed because of your nerves. Don't let this discourage you. Don't give up." So Jason went, and I said, let me lay a line. Let me see if maybe something's going on that you're missing. So we lay a line and we wait. And I gave Michael some feedback. I said, "Look, I don't want you to handle your dog. Hold on to the lead. Let the dog take you where it wants to take you. And let's see what's going on." The dog smoked it. And that boosted Michael's confidence like through the roof.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And he's like, "Man," I said, "Look, you have it. I knew you had it before you even tested today. I thought it was just, you were going to breeze right through it." But his nerves got to him. And we took that time to pull him to the side, and not to coach him on how to pass. It was to build his confidence, because in the shape that he was in, he would have, who knows, he may have never tracked a deer again. We don't want people to leave discouraged. Right. We're not going to give a test away. Don't get me wrong. We're not going to give a test away. But, keep that in mind. When you get there, it's not, even if you don't pass, it's not a reflection that you're a bad tracker or you have a bad dog. Sometimes there's other things like nerves, and we pulled him aside, and guess what? When he came back and retested, he ran it flawless. I mean, when we got the notes from the judge that administered the test, that he said he just did amazing, I think was the exact words. I have to go back and look at it.
Yeah. Yep, for sure. Yeah, that is a good story. And I'd had the privilege of hearing that one before, and it is a nice validation for sure. There's a lot of comments in here talking about validation. That's why people are testing, just to validate that they're doing that their work is producing the results that they're looking for. There's a lot of that in here.
Okay, Rodney responded and said on the dragging test line. So we don't actually drag anything. We use hooves, and actually our standard is we use hooves and Wascow tracking shoes and 2 ounces of blood that will be equally distributed for the early on tests. It may not be equally distributed strategically on other tests. So, and the reason we use Wascow shoes is not because we're necessarily a partnership with that company. We want consistency. We want it to be as fair and consistent across the board as we can. Yep.
Boy, look at these questions.
Yeah, we're gonna have to just roll with comments because there's a bunch here.
That's what I think. Let me scroll up here because I've been, and let me just pick up on let's just hit them, okay? Dustin King says in Alabama, our state tracking pages, they put if the dog is certified or not on the handler list. I think hunters do tend to call the certified dog handlers more. I could see that being the case. In fact, I might do that. Maybe.
Well, I will say this: on the Alabama list, my certifications are not accurate on the Alabama list. I still get a bunch of calls.
Yeah. Yep. Let's see what Wesley Bivens says. I'm a brand new handler with a 6-month-old working towards started test. The reason for me to test is self-validation that we are on the right path.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the best reason right there.
Yep, absolutely. Michael Pitts, does going on a lot of unrecovered deer hurt the dog in any way? This is always.
I like this question. I
I
love
do
this
too.
question.
It's a good question. Go ahead.
No, it does not. It hurts the handler's ego a little bit, I guess you'd say. But no, you will learn. You and your dog will learn more on the unrecoverable or unrecovered, unsuccessful tracks. And unsuccessful is
Yeah,
not
don't
really the right
say
word.
unsuccessful. Yeah, say it.
But not recovered deer, you will learn more on those than you will on a recovered deer every time.
Some of the, like we always say, some of the best dog work happens on deer that don't end on tailgates. Ethan, you're standing on your head, buddy. There you go. Yeah, absolutely. It is that dog. The dog's doing what it loves to do, smelling a fun scent and following it as far as it can. But the hunter, it can, and I mean the handler, it can grate on you, man. It can grate on you, and that's where, how do you? That was one of the topics. One of the questions. How do you get out of a slump? You know how you get out of a slump? You take another track.
Yep.
Because it's cyclical. Why? I don't know. No, it just is. Some of the most well-known trackers, social media wise, were at this event, and they're talking about their 0-14 streak.
Yep. Oh yeah. I was actually going to mention that Randy Vick and we had a conversation one year. He started out 0 and something. I started out 0 and something, and we're calling each other like, what in the world? And then next thing you know, I went like 18 in a row, and then Randy's just banging them out, and then all of a sudden I drop off. He's still going, then I get going, and he drops off, and we're conversing about it. It's just when you don't screen calls, that's going to happen, and I don't screen calls. The only time I screen calls would be if it's late at night and I don't want to go very far.
Yeah, you're screening it for distance and
Right.
things like that. Yeah, that's different.
And prioritizing.
Yeah, yep. So let's Robbie's, because this is interesting. I'd be as a breeder, Kenny, interested in your thoughts on this one. And Ethan, chime in, buddy. I think having a certification helps when breeding is involved. Shows you have a certified working dog versus a non-working dog.
I'm just gonna be honest. It's a sales and marketing tactic, to be completely honest. I mean, I've trained dogs from pounds that you don't even know what was in them. Now, and I know there's some breeders out there that's gonna chastise me for that, but is there some validity to it? I mean, yeah, I mean, it does show that the parents are, working dogs and trainable, but at the end of the day, I can train a pound puppy to track a deer.
Yeah. Yep.
Ethan, if we're being honest,
Yes, of course. Look, man. So Ethan, is this in response to the question? Will tracking dogs on non-recoveries hurt a dog?
Yeah, yeah. I replied to him.
Into it, buddy, because we didn't give you a chance, buddy, and I really apologize.
You got to jump in there.
Oh no, that's all right. Yeah, I mean, if they're legitimate non-recoveries, I mean, if they're unrecoverable deer, I haven't seen any issue with my dogs losing interest in the task. I've seen them.
Again, needs more stars for his link. Okay. All right, Ethan. Sorry, buddy. Let's look at Calvin here. Wait, I think you meant way to go, Calvin, not way Tongo. Unless you're speaking, Waitongo, Kenny, struck Matt's nail right on the head. Haha. Where is the,
I think he
where is
means
this?
where I see the validation.
Yeah, where I see the validation to hunters is when they have been following your tracking page, seeing your progression throughout, and then knowing you were able to pass a certification you set out for. So sorry, Kelvin, for my third grade reading inability. Yep.
Yeah, I mean that's accurate. I agree with that.
Here's one. What's all I'll say. I agree. I also look at it as if someone was buying a pup for me as a point of dedication. Must be back to this the certification for breeding.
I got to read this, and I'm starting a GoFundMe to get Ethan some internet that works.
We picked on it the other day because he does have Starlink, and Kenny and I both have it too. And he must not, like I say, he must down there in that part of Arkansas. There must not be many stars to link to. I guess I don't know.
So Tony Hayes' comment here, says, I was surprised how many calls I received through the UBT website, and they mentioned the verified. It's a green check mark for passing a certification. I'm going to tell you, I rarely get a call off the UBT website. And it's probably because our state network is so strong and been around so long. In fact, when I do get a call from it, it's someone that may have just moved to the area, kind of new to the area and doesn't know yet. But I almost never get a call. And the verified, they probably don't even know what verified means when they're just thinking, okay, well, verified, it must mean something. I don't know, but maybe I should call this person. Randy Vick's comment.
I was just going to.
I use that a lot, and I give all the credit to Randy. Randy's been a friend of mine, a tracking buddy for many, many years. And he says this all the time. All a tracker has is his or her reputation.
Yep. And isn't that the case with anybody for anything? But you're right. I agree with that. Let's look at John. John, I think you had John's dog for a while, Kenny.
Yes.
I think it helps new trackers to give validation to their dogs. Not that they may ask, but it's something that allows us new guys. We can say we don't have a ton of experience, but we are heading in the right direction. Yeah, I mean, I think there's that. That's what I mean. It gives credibility that your dog. Somebody has said your dog knows how to follow the line from this point to that point. Yep.
And I think more so than that, it builds confidence. And
100%.
And one thing you need when you're dealing with hunters is confidence. If you're not confident when you're talking to that hunter, they're not going to be confident in you.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. Courtney DeMello, at my local sportsman club, I got invited because I was certified. Otherwise, I agree. The certificate is between you and your dog. Yeah. So there is value in testing. Value in testing. Again, not that it makes anybody better than anybody else, but there's value, whether it's personal value, whether it's external value like this.
Kelly York's right there.
Yep. Well, I have to say I got certified simply for me. Way to go, Kelly. I need to lean and the knowledge that I got. I need to learn, and knowledge that I got that weekend was beyond measure.
Yeah, and he probably will say this, but he probably learned a lot just from us standing around talking. People doesn't realize all the sidebar conversation. You're going to learn a lot just in that, being at these events.
That's where the gold is. I mean, the presented material is good for sure, but the gold lies in that campfire stuff.
Bob Quinn, talk about the do and don't you can do if you find a live deer. That all depends on your state laws.
Yeah,
and
Bob is in Michigan. He and I chat a little bit. Yeah, he's getting started, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that needs to be referred to someone that knows the state laws in that state, and I do know them, but I'm not
Yeah.
as adverse, and I'll just say, sometimes it's like Las Vegas.
Yeah. So Bob, in Michigan, we do not have tracker dispatch. The hunter can dispatch with a weapon of season as long as you are registered with the state of Michigan. And if you're tracking, you're registered, because you can't legally do it unless you are registered. So
That's something I don't like. I don't agree with. I hate that law is written. That's why I wasn't even going to say anything on it, because
no, I'm sorry.
that is
I'm
such
sorry.
a safety risk. No, you're good. You're good. But that's such a safety risk.
Yeah, it does require, going back. Let's talk about that for a second, Kenny, because we're on there, and it is important, for states that have that rule. You talked about confidence, and where you were talking about confidence with the hunter, which I think is important. It also comes to command, in that you must have
now
the
we're
confidence.
losing you.
How about now?
Yeah, you're good now.
Okay, I started to say it's confidence and command, and you must be in command of your track. And when my perspective is, once the hunter calls you and you show up, he relinquishes the command of that track to you. You are the track commander, and you must, with all confidence and command, be expressly clear on your expectations. That doesn't mean be a jerk by any sense, but be expressly clear and commanding in what you expect from that hunter, in term if you're going to allow him to carry his weapon or not, because you don't have to let him do it just because the state law says that he's allowed to. As the track commander, you don't have to let him.
No,
And
and
if you
I
do,
will say this one thing you can do, and I have done this. If they're just adamant about it, I will take their ammo. I'll say when it's time, when it's time, I will give you your one Barney Fife bullet, and I will let you know. I mean, because just go listen to One Track Mind podcast with Ron Slifer and listen to his story of being shot in the leg with a crossbow.
Yes.
What, 2 centimeters away from death.
From slicing the femoral artery, which would have equaled death in all practical scenarios. That is right. So, I do the same thing. I do that when I do let the hunter carry. If it's a firearm, I take their ammo, and then I make them show clear. I make them open their chamber, show clear, and then, like you said, I'll give them. And I've used that phrase before. I'll give you your Barney Fife if we need to do it. Now, bows, compound bows a little bit different. You're not allowed to walk around with an arrow nocked or anything. But Bob, we can talk about it more if you want to. Feel free to give me a shout. Michael back talking when you told the story. He says he was more upset because he felt like he failed his dog,
and he did say that day.
Yep. Yep. But Adam Hatt, I have 100% been frustrated on a track and messed up my dog. That dog tracker connection goes deeper than I think we know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. We've all been there. Kelly says again, I was told at the end that my dog was not the problem; it was me, and I was able to get so much help I would not have gotten otherwise. Yeah, we are always.
I heard a lot of good feedback about his dog.
Good.
Yeah.
We are always the weakest link. It's just the way it's gonna be. You see one, Kenny, you want to grab?
Let's see. let's go to Bob Bluebells. So I questioned that a couple of times this year and felt maybe she wasn't doing her job. In reality, it was in most cases poor shot placement. I went on many that I had a pretty good idea before leaving home we weren't recovering the deer, but I keep hearing you don't know unless you go. I'd go through maybe 4 or 5, and then she's make me a believer of me with an amazing recovery. You know, and that's why I go on every track I possibly can, whether I think it's a successful track or not. And another thing, spending all this time with your dog, learning to read your dog, and that's what the training is really about. Once you get to a certain level, once you get to a certain level, it no longer becomes more so of you training the dog. It's actually you're training yourself, and you don't even realize it. But you start learning the cues, and same thing with going on tracks. You're going to learn more and more about your dog. And that goes into a story I've shared multiple times. My dog Dixie, and I'm kind of going to share the story, but my dog Dixie, if she knows that deer is not fatally wounded, she will come back and she will jump up on me and everyone else. That's her tell that, hey, Dad, we're not getting this one. And so I share that with the hunter. Before, like if I know I got called for a back whack, and I told the hunter on the phone, I said, look, I'll come. Actually, I'm sorry, it was a miss. This one was he didn't know if he hit the deer or not. That's what this one was. And I said, hey, we'll come, and she'll tell me. And so then I'm on my way there, and then more information comes out. Well, I did find blood. Well, it did hit the ground and flop around a little bit, but I thought it was because it was startled. I missed because I couldn't find blood.
Yeah.
So then I just told him, I said, look, odds are we're not going to recover your deer. But I'm going to come because there's a chance, and this is what my dog is going to do if it is not a recoverable deer. And early on, years ago, I would have spent 3-4 hours out there trying to please that hunter, where now I know my dog's sign, what it's going to tell me and how it tells me. And I convey that to the hunter beforehand. And now instead of being there 3 hours, I was there 10 minutes. And the hunter was satisfied because I was confident and I knew my dog.
Yep. That's
and then I get a call this year. Someone tracked a deer for someone. I forget what state it was now. And the person tells me, yeah, I tracked a deer for this guy. And he told me, yeah, I had a guy track a deer for me one time, and the dog jumped up on him and told him that my deer wasn't going to die. And the person says, yeah, I know Kenny Mullins too. In Dixie.
That's funny. That's funny. Yeah, a lot of people picking on Ethan here, appropriately so. Picking it, Dylan. I enjoyed testing, whether it's a pass or fail. Your judge may see something you're doing wrong, or spot something your dog's telling you that you didn't notice. It's always a good chance to learn from someone with more experience. Judges see way more dogs and handlers than most of us. I personally can't wait for the day I am ready to become a judge, just to gain that extra experience behind other breeds. Yeah, it's.
And let me tell you, it not only do you gain the experience behind other breeds, you gain so much experience that will transition into your tracking from being a judge. It's unreal.
I've heard that from multiple judges, and UBT or ABTA doesn't matter. I get that a lot, and and this comes from people who I have very strong connections with, for sure.
I'd like to touch on Norman Park's comment there.
I was just going to pull it up. Yep.
Norman says, I quit counting recoveries several years ago. I know that we find and don't find lots of deer. We are 100% on effort, and no doubt. And I will say this, I don't put a lot of emphasis on numbers anymore. as far as displaying them to the general public or even to fellow trackers. Why is it good to keep that information and keep those records and detailed records? Because it will show you your training opportunities in the off season.
Yep.
That's what your record should be for.
Yep. I agree. And I think this is worth putting up. The people I've met testing have been invaluable. The judges after the fact have always been a phone call away as well. You know, and to me that just speaks to the philosophy of the betterment of the tracking community. And if you're doing it for the right reasons, none of us own tracking, no organization, no person, no network, nobody owns this stuff. And there's no reason to feel threatened by it because there's just no reason for it. So the back to the philosophy we read it at the top of the show here is it's about sharing knowledge. It's about being inclusive. And I think now, sharing knowledge is in the mission. One of the guiding principles for judges is we use the word inclusive, so it's all right there, man. So I'm glad that's been your experience.
We got to go to Dylan Major's comment right there.
Right here?
Yep. We can all learn a lesson from Ron Slifer on hunters having loaded weapons. We can also learn from Ron Slifer why to not shoot a 2-blade rage.
Oh, yeah. I know what that's about. Yeah, that's right. Darren Miner
podcast even says if that broadhead would have been turned horizontally instead of vertically, it would have hit the artery. So what do you think happens to a deer? What would have happened if it was a fixed blade, a bad to the bone Muzzy?
Yeah, Muzzy bad to the bone was my favorite broadhead for a long time, 30 years ago. But you're exactly right. Now you're frozen, Kenny. But,
can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're good. So just to put a little color on that, and I don't want to. No, I'm not going to, because you need to go listen to Matt and Lindsay's One Track Mind podcast and listen to Ron on the podcast. It's a really good show. Ron is just a great storyteller, but he's telling stories, but they're real stories, and a lot of it's relatable, and there's lessons to be learned.
Yep, educational value.
Particularly when he starts talking about his unfortunate incident of getting shot. That is goddamn well. Everybody
getting carjacked.
And then we add the humor, getting carjacked, and listen to him the conversations he's having with his kidnapper. What in the world? That was freaking funnier than crap. I got to admit it. But guys, go listen to that. Just check out the One Track Mind anyway. There's a lot of good stuff there.
Richard Womack's comment right there.
Why not just make the rule that no guns aside from yours goes on the track? You can.
That is a rule.
Yeah. I mean, that
is a rule for me. Now, I have had incidents where a hunter we have a lot of bear in our area, a lot of bear. And we have hunters that are terrified of bears for whatever reason. And so I do run across people that are so afraid of the bears that they will refuse to leave their firearm.
Mm-hmm.
And in that case, sometimes I'll just load my dogs up and go, or sometimes I'll just tell them, if at any point I want them right beside me at that point. I don't want them behind me. I want them right beside me. And even then I worry about my dog. So I just tell them, hey, if we get into a base situation, you do not run to those dogs. And if they do, I call my dog off of it.
Yep.
Yeah. So if that does happen, there's some extra safety precautions I take there.
Yeah. I've only had one situation, I take that back, two in my moderately experienced tracking career where the hunter had the opportunity to dispatch, and they were both during bow season. The hunter had to go back to the truck to get his bow. It was 19 hours after the shot. It was still alive on a low lung liver, and then the other one was just this weird kind of leg brisket hit with a crossbow. But I've never had one with a gun, and I don't really want one with the gun, but it's coming. It'll happen.
I had a game warden shoot over my dog, like literally between my head, the hunter's head. The game warden shot a 300 Win Mag from behind us over my dog to shoot the deer that my dog had bait up.
Wow. That, I wasn't going to bring this up, but I'm going to since you said that. Again, in Missouri, there was conversation. Ron's scenario always comes up. It's a legendary story in the tracking community. We all know about it. I still encourage you to go listen to Ron tell it in his firsthand account. But they were talking about a tracker, and I have a very, very, very faint recollection of this, and maybe I'm fabricating this memory. But a tracker, I don't remember where they were talking about. A tracker was shot in the head by a hunter because they jumped the deer, and the hunter had his gun, and he started to swing on the deer and swung right past the tracker and squeezed the trigger, and then a funeral was planned.
Yeah, I remember when that happened. I can't even remember what state, but I do remember when that happened.
Yeah, I mean, that's tragic, So
I almost watched a tracker. I'm not going to mention any names, but they're because they're on here. I don't know how they'd feel about me sharing this, but I watched my dogs ran a deer right by us, and there were 3 trackers there. It was just my dogs out. There was 3 handlers. Only one person handling my dogs. Don't get me wrong, but there was 3 of us trackers there.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the trackers with me, a very, very veteran, seasoned tracker, pulled out a pistol as the deer was running by us to shoot the deer. And one of the other trackers was going to run behind the dogs and the deer going to them. And that pistol was aimed right here, and that person's head was right there. Mm-hmm. And it was just the trigger control by that person is what saved the other person from being shot that day.
Yeah, man, I'm starting.
It happened so fast. It happened so fast, and I'm just saying. And the whole time, I'm actually saying, "Whoa, wait! They're going to get this deer." Stop! But everything happened so fast.
Yeah. Well, especially a hunter, man. They're so excited anyway, and then just man, I'm starting to get myself creeped out. I want to pull up John's here because I have a comment on it. I think one of y'all said use a knife, or maybe Ralph said it. Thanks for everything, y'all. But I got to tell you, the whole knife thing. Again, I don't have a lot of experience, but there was one. I guess I've had 3 that had to be dispatched. We were only at the 10-hour mark on a liver hit deer at like 4:30 in the morning, and the hunter didn't. It was before work, so I didn't think to tell him, "Hey man, you can bring your bow if you want to." I was sort of trying to hurry, so I wanted to get on the track, and I just forgot to mention that. And we found it still alive. There wasn't much life left in it, but we found the deer. And he says, "What do I do now?" I go, I'm here to find the deer. It's right there. I'm like, "Well, here, man." And I gave him my knife, and he went up there to, dispatch the deer. And I don't personally like that, but that deer had enough line where he was trying to stab the deer. The deer was trying to stab him back with his horn. So my point is that's just, boy, that's just dangerous, man. I mean, it's all so are guns, but if you're gonna go up there and think you're gonna just jump on a deer's neck and slit his throat or something, just be freaking mindful about what you're doing. Be careful where that knife blade ends up.
And let me tell you, I have wrestled a lot of deer over the years.
Jeez,
and let me tell you, there ain't a man out there that can tangle with a deer that ain't fatigued.
Yeah.
A good friend of mine, I got called to track one in Barber County, Alabama, which is about 3.5 hours from me. And I went up there and we tracked this deer. It was shot that morning, and I got there about 1:00 in the morning, I think it was. And we tracked this deer a long, long ways and finally got it bayed up. And the hunter, I have a video of it. The hunter borrowed a pistol from his brother, and these are very close friends I tracked a lot with. So I let him carry the pistol, and even then, I'll share this video at some point, not on here, but at a seminar. I'll share this, and this, like I said, this guy's been on a lot of tracks with me, and emotions set in, and Xena had this deer bayed up, and we got within, I don't know, 80 yards, we could see it, and she's baying, and he pulls out the pistol, and I'm like, no. And I was kind of, after I went back and watched the video, I was pretty rude to him, and rightfully so. I mean, he was about to shoot my dog, but he got excited, adrenaline pumping. He was 80 yards away with a 22 pistol, gonna try to shoot this deer that wasn't going anywhere. My dog had it held.
Yeah.
And then I got frustrated. I'm like, no, get up here, get up here, get up here. And all the commotion, my dog left the deer. She was a puppy that year. I think she was 7 months old. But anyways, we get up there, and finally I tell him to shoot, and it's click, 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 click. And on the video, are you kidding me? And I'll play this for some of you guys at the seminar.
Yeah.
And he didn't know that the pistol had a safety on it. So we just thought it was bad bullets, or it wasn't loaded, whatever.
Yeah.
And he pulls out his knife, and he goes walking up there. And I said, again, it just wrapped up the moment. Like, be careful, it's alive. Like, he doesn't know this. The deer sitting looking at us, but he grabs it, and he's a big boy. He's pretty stout and muscular. And he grabbed a hold of that deer, and in the video, it doesn't look like the deer put up much of a fight. And he stuck it with a knife, and he held that deer. And afterwards, he literally laid there for 45 minutes. He was gassed from trying to hold that deer from getting him.
Yeah, trying to wrestle a deer that's all jacked up on adrenaline and whatever else. Wow,
like I said, I've dispatched a bunch with a knife, and I'm not a fan of it.
No, I've never done it, and it's not on my list of things to do. Like I said, as crappy as this may sound, I guess there might be some very, very particular situations where I might do it, but otherwise, I'm here to find it, and it's right there. So let's read. I want to read Ethan's, and then let's touch on Randy's because it ties into Ethan's, Kenny. And if we're talking about safety and words of wisdom and being in command of a track, and Calvin, yes, I did see your comment about the new T-shirt for me saying "Track Commander." Yeah, I'm going to send my order to the printer. But Ethan, in all of his Starlink, says, I hunter from who knows where show up to bay, and I had the gun aimed and noticed he was on the other side of the action watching. Wasn't part of the original tracking party. Just heard the commotion and decided to show up. I now tell hunters to text and call everyone hunting in the area to let them know to stay put. Wow, that is not cool. And Randy comes in commenting on that. The most dangerous situation a tracker can get in is people coming to to a bay from different directions. So that's a great point, Ethan and Randy. Yeah, it's a bit being in command and in states where that is more although we can do it in Michigan, it's not as prominent as it is um, in the southern states. But good heavens to Pete, yes, be mindful of that.
Yeah, and I'm gonna share another story here with me and Randy Vick. Me and Randy Vick's been on a bunch of bays together, a bunch of bays and catches. We back each other up. And Randy called me on one that he's and it was about 2.5 hours from my house, and he calls me, says, "Hey, you able to come back me up? I feel like we can get this deer. Reba got overheated." I said, "Sure, I'll head that way." And we get there, and I got a picture of it, but the dogs were struggling bad. It was hot. I mean, it was hot that day, and we were dang near ready to call it. And then all of a sudden, my younger dog at the time, Sam, he worked it out and jumped the deer up, and it came running over, and it literally stopped and squared off at Randy. It looked at me, it looked at Randy. The hunter was behind us.
Mm-hmm.
And it looked at me, looked back at Randy again, and lowered its head down and was coming wide open. Randy put himself in between a little pine tree and the deer, and I really didn't have anywhere to get behind at the time. But luckily, my other dog Xena, she saved the day and put the deer down before it could get to us. But there again, the experience, we made sure that hunter stayed behind us, and I would have taken the brunt of that deer before I let it go to the hunter. But things can happen fast. I can think of another one. I got called to track a deer, and it was in this you guys may not know what they are, but the tie thicket, just really thick, bushy stuff we have here in the swamps in my area. And the deer was bedded up in that, and the dog went in there. And when the dog did, that deer came out, and it came running straight at me. And I literally jumped in the air, and its head was down. He was charging me. I jumped in the air and literally landed on the deer. I mean, I've had a lot of close calls. It's
my day's coming. I don't
recommend sticking them with a knife.
I don't want to do that, and one of the conversations of the past weekend I heard with, when the knife conversation came up is where to try to stick them. One person was saying stick them. Yeah, that's what they said, right in the heart, and I've always wondered about if you could just poke them in the jugular and how quickly that would, but I just don't want to do it, man. I don't want to. That's too barbaric for me. I'm too soft. I just don't want to do any of it. But
yeah, I grew up hog hunting, so we grab the hogs and stick them.
Okay, yeah, and I've never done that. I'm kind of a wuss, so
yeah.
But I think we hit the substantive comments. Not to discredit those that are chiming in and saying hi and replying to others, guys. We really do appreciate those. It clearly drove the show tonight, and we appreciate that.
And poke them lungs and slice down a rib through. Yeah. Actually, I didn't even realize it. But when we had Brian Johnson on, he talked about, I can't remember what he called it now, but basically hitting the top part of that heart.
Mm-hmm.
What did he call it? I can't remember, but that's inadvertently, not knowing, that's where I would dispatch that knife.
Well, the fire hydrant section, you hit them all. Those major arteries. That's his. All of his chop placement technology is to hit that, not the center punch the heart, but hit that that fire hydrant section. So, yeah, I don't know.
And although we started off with testing, and I'm glad, we got some of that in, and it opened up the door for a lot of this stuff.
Absolutely.
which I think is great. And, if you really want to know more about our testing, we do have resources on our website, and Ethan actually shared a link in the comments. So,
Yep.
we touched on the basics and some reasoning behind we do what we do. And just, if you go read the documents, I don't think we need to sit here and elaborate on it a bunch, because we have already. I think there's more value in the questions that you guys are asking. And,
Yes.
I appreciate it, because sometimes, you guys asking these questions brings up stuff that I, put on the back shelf. And, I'm glad you bring it back.
Yeah.
There's things I take for granted I forget about sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. Get it off the shelf, dust it off, and make it fresh again. Yeah. I totally agree. There's a ton of value in the comments and feedbacks and questions. I enjoy it, and the way this show evolved was absolutely perfect. So
Yeah, and Matt, I know we have a tentative schedule lined up, but and I hope you don't mind me sharing this. But we've kind of been looking at changing things up a little.
yeah, no, please share. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so one thing we're looking to do is we're going to start highlighting some more trackers and hunters, and getting them on for a little bit of Q&A, and let's hear your story. What got you into tracking? What dog
Yeah.
do you have? What training techniques do you use? So if that's something you're interested in and you would like to be a guest, just reach out to us, and we'd love to have you.
Yeah, exactly right. And if you have a recommendation for a topic or something, maybe we could have a viewer topic night or something, which is really kind of what the comments turn into. But send us something to jumpstart a conversation and on a topic that you like. But you're right, Kenny. The stories that were shared here today, and stories shared in the comments, that there's a lot of value in that. And some of the feedback, I got to tell you this, some of the feedback that I've gotten from my own little hobby podcast is, I really wanted it to be, have elements of learning in it. And I try to get people on that can do some version of learning. But, I got some feedback very recently that, the stories, just tracking stories with Matt Davis and then Dave Medore. People, the feedback I got is people really enjoy that, because they're picking stuff up. I got a lot of feedback from this live stream or regarding these Tuesday night lives, as well as my own podcast last weekend in Missouri. And I was a little, flattered and humbled, and felt pretty good about it. People enjoyed the content, and we don't always have to have some in-depth intellectual topic. I mean, everything we talk about is intellectual. I mean, come on. But stories, there's lessons to be learned in stories.
Right.
And people enjoy that. Now, we're still going to have Brian Johnson on. That was a huge show. We're going to have him back for part 2. We're still going to do that type of stuff. But Kenny, you're 100% right. Based on that personal feedback I got, and I didn't tell you that today when we were having that conversation, but that's really kind of how we want to start to shape these out a little bit, and these real world, just grassroots conversation is what it's about.
That's right. That's right. And I have a few people that I'd like to invite on. I told you about one, and I tracked the deer for him. As far as I know, if I remember correctly, I was the first tracker he'd used, and then he became a tracker.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now he no longer tracks for the public, and even after he trained his dog, he still has me come and track. But we got some good stories.
Yeah. Yeah,
It-
absolutely.
It's always an adventure. I'll say that.
Yep. Yep, for sure. That's great. So we kind of have I'll say an outline of topics, but as we continue to evolve and grow and try to do what the viewers want, that's just a list to choose from, and we're going to choose from what people can get the most out of. And sometimes it's not always about deep thinking. It's about just sharing stories and the impacts that tracking has had on their lives or one tracker's had on another and all that stuff. So I'm rambling now, but yeah.
And even like I said, even bring on some people that aren't trackers, but they've utilized trackers, and we can learn.
Oh yeah. I call it on mine a tale of the track. If you use a tracker, come tell your story. I love to hear it from the hunter's perspective. I love to hear what the hunter was thinking while he's behind me. And my dog's doing what the dog does. One of them was he says he told the story about how he looked around at his buddy and give the what the hell is this dog doing? And he goes, "Oh, he's standing over my deer." I'm like, "Oh, I didn't know you did that." So yeah, that's fun stuff. Folks. Yeah.
You see a comment right there. Perry Lawrence says, "Same here. You got me into it after that track from hell." So Perry just invited himself on here without realizing it to share that story about the floating hat.
Perry, next week's episode is now titled Perry Lawrence and the Floating Hat. Get it ready, Perry. Perry Lawrence and the Floating Hat. Yep. Sounds like a Nancy Drew mystery book.
Oh, we had a great time on that track. For sure.
Then the story shall be shared. All right, buddy. Well, I think we're kind of at a natural point here. Couple hours in. Great questions, great comments. Perry thinks that's funny. But Perry, we're serious about you coming on, so I'm serious when I say be ready to roll, bro. But anyway, guys, yeah, I think we're there, Kenny. Any parting thoughts, bud?
No, and just get out there and work your dog. If we started off with testing, I'm ended it with a little bit of testing stuff. Even if you don't want to test, that's fine.
Yeah,
it's completely fine. But get out there and work your dog.
Get out there and work your dog. Questions on testing, like Kenny said, the material's out there. Give any one of us a shout. We never don't like talking about tracking and testing. So you have your questions
every day. That's my life every day.
Yeah. If you have a question, don't let it go unanswered. With that, I think that's it, guys. So till Tuesday, more of the good, less of the bad. Thank you all. Appreciate everything. We'll talk soon, guys.
Thank you.